Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Best Health Podcast.
Mm.
Today we're diving into something that might just change how you think about stress forever.
Oh,
Get this. We're talking about good stress.
I know it sounds a bit strange, right? We're
Yeah.
so used to thinking of stress as the enemy, something to be avoided at all costs.
Exactly. But what if I told you that stress in the right amounts and with the right mindset can actually be beneficial
Beneficial for your health.
for your health,
Yeah.
your brain, even your immune system?
That's what's so fascinating about this deep dive.
It really is. The sources you've shared really challenge that conventional view of stress as purely negative.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, let's talk about what good stress actually means. The American Psychological Association, the APA, defines it as eustress, which basically means a positive response to stress that involves just the right level of stimulation.
Okay.
Think of it like this, that feeling of excitement and anticipation you get before a big event, like a presentation or a competition.
Yeah.
That's eustress in action. It's that little push that gets you energized and focused.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the kind of stress we usually associate with negative feelings, like anxiety and pressure? Can that actually be good for us too?
It can in a way. The source material points out that even what we typically consider distress can have benefits, especially in the short term. It's almost like our bodies have this built-in mechanism to temporarily enhance our capabilities when we're faced with challenges.
So it's like a burst of energy and focus to help us deal with a difficult situation.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that this isn't just some vague idea. The research actually shows some specific ways that stress can make us stronger, smarter, and even healthier.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, let's talk about brain power. Did you know that even low levels of stress can actually stimulate the production of neurotrophins in the brain?
Neuro what now?
Neurotrophins. They're basically like brain food. They help strengthen the connections between neurons, which is essential for learning and memory.
So you're saying that a little bit of stress can actually help my brain function better.
That's right. It's almost like stress is giving your brain a workout, helping it build those neural pathways and become more resilient.
Wow, that's amazing. And speaking of workouts, one of our sources actually compares the benefits of stress to the benefits of exercise.
That's Dr. Richard Shelton, Vice Chair for Research in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. He points out that exercise is essentially a physical stressor, and we all know that regular exercise is great for boosting productivity and concentration.
So could we potentially apply the same logic to mental stressors? Could we strategically incorporate small, manageable stressors into our day to help us focus and get things done?
It's definitely an interesting idea, and there's some evidence to support it. A 2017 review published in the EXCLI journal found that stress in certain situations can actually improve short-term memory.
So maybe that feeling of pre-exam jitters isn't such a bad thing after all.
Exactly. It might actually be helping you remember that key information you need to ace the test.
Okay, so stress can be good for our brains. But what about our immune systems? Doesn't stress usually make us more susceptible to getting sick?
That's what we tend to think. But the research suggests that short-term stress can actually have the opposite effect. It's like our bodies go into this prepare for battle mode when we're stressed. And part of that preparation involves boosting our immune defenses.
Wait, so you're telling me that stress can actually help me fight off a cold?
It's not quite that simple, but there's definitely a connection. Dr. Shelton explains that when we experience stress, our bodies release a bunch of chemicals, including something called interleukins.
Interleukins, that sounds intense.
They are pretty powerful. They're basically messengers that help regulate the immune system. And when we're stressed, our bodies produce extra interleukins, which can give our immune system a temporary boost.
So it's like a short-term shield to protect us from potential threats.
Exactly. And this isn't just theory. An April 2018 study in Frontiers in Neuroendocrinology found that this short-term stress response might provide immune protection, especially if someone gets injured or has an infection.
Wow, that's incredible. It seems like stress has a lot more going for it than we usually give it credit for.
It really does. And by the way, if you're finding this information as fascinating as I am, make sure to check out besthealthpodcasts.site.
besthealthpodcasts.site.
Yes, for more in-depth articles and resources on all things health and wellness.
It's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to learn more about optimizing their health and well-being.
Now, before we move on, I have to ask, we've been talking about all these benefits of stress, but isn't there a point where it becomes too much? Like, when does good stress turn into bad stress?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore more deeply in the next part of this deep dive. But for now, let's continue to unpack some of the surprising upsides of stress. You ready for more?
Absolutely. Let's continue exploring the benefits. You might be surprised to learn that stress can actually make you more resilient. Resilient, like bouncing back from setbacks more easily.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Each stressful experience, if managed well, is like a training session
A training
for
session.
your mind and body. You're building up your ability to cope with challenges and adapt to change.
So the more we expose ourselves to manageable stressors, the better equipped we'll be to handle tough situations in the future.
That's the idea. One of the sources even uses the example of Navy SEAL training to illustrate this point.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is. SEALs go through incredibly rigorous training that pushes them to their absolute limits, both physically and mentally. But by repeatedly facing these challenges, they develop incredible resilience and the ability to stay calm and focused under pressure.
I see. They're basically building up a tolerance for stress.
Precisely. And while most of us will never go through SEAL training, the principle still applies. We can train ourselves to become more resilient by gradually exposing ourselves to manageable stressors in our everyday lives.
So it's not about avoiding stress altogether, but rather learning to view it as an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. Instead of seeing stress as something to be feared, what if we saw it as a challenge to overcome, a chance to build our mental and emotional muscles?
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah,
And it makes me think about another point that Dr. Schulten makes in one of the articles. He talks about how stress can actually be a powerful motivator.
absolutely. Think about a deadline at work. It's stressful, sure, but that pressure can also be what pushes you to focus and get things done.
That's so true. Sometimes I feel like I do my best work when I have a little bit of healthy pressure.
It's like that extra kick in the pants we sometimes need to get moving and achieve our goals.
So to recap, we've talked about how stress can actually improve brain function, boost the immune system, make us more resilient, and even motivate us to get things done. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. And it just goes to show that stress isn't always the enemy.
Right. It's all about perspective and learning to harness the power of stress in a positive way. Speaking of which, for all of you out there who are interested in learning more about optimizing your health and well-being, we have a fantastic resource for you. Best Health Podcast site. You'll find tons of information, tips, and resources to help you live your best, healthiest life.
Absolutely. It's a great place to dive deeper into these topics and explore strategies for managing stress effectively.
Now, before we get too carried away singing the praises of stress, I think it's important to acknowledge the other side of the coin. We've been focusing on the potential upsides, but we can't ignore the fact that chronic, unmanaged stress can be detrimental to our health.
That's a crucial point. While short bursts of stress can be beneficial, prolonged exposure to stress can have serious negative consequences for our physical and mental well-being.
So how do we know when stress is becoming a problem? What are some signs that we might need to take a step back and reevaluate our relationship with stress?
That's a great question, and one we'll delve into more deeply in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the potential downsides of chronic stress and discuss some practical strategies for managing stress effectively.
All right, so we've explored how stress in the right doses can actually be good for us. But as we hinted at in the last part, there's a flip side of this coin.
Right.
What happens when stress becomes chronic and we don't manage it effectively?
That's when stress starts to shift from being a friend to a foe. When stress becomes chronic, it's like that constant low hum in the background that never really goes away. It can start to wear down our bodies and minds, impacting everything from our sleep to our immune system to our mental health.
So it's like the difference between a quick sprint that energizes you and running a marathon without proper training or rest.
Exactly. Our bodies are designed to handle short bursts of stress, but they're not equipped to deal with prolonged, intense stress without consequences.
What are some of those consequences? What kind of health issues can chronic stress contribute to?
Well, for starters, chronic stress can wreak havoc on our sleep. It can make it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep, leaving us feeling exhausted and drained even after a full night's rest.
I know I've definitely experienced that. When I'm stressed, my mind just races at night, and I can't seem to shut it off.
It's a common problem, and unfortunately, poor sleep can create a vicious cycle. When we're sleep deprived, we're more susceptible to stress, and when we're stressed, we're more likely to have trouble sleeping.
So it's like a double whammy. And it's not just sleep right. Chronic stress can also impact our immune system.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about short-term stress actually boosting the immune system? Well, with chronic stress, it's the opposite. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones can actually suppress the immune system, making us more vulnerable to infections and illnesses.
So that old adage about stress making you sick actually has some truth to it.
It does, and we're just scratching the surface here. Chronic stress has also been linked to a wide range of other health issues, including heart disease, high blood pressure, digestive problems, and even certain types of cancer.
Wow, that's a pretty serious list. It makes you realize just how important it is to manage stress effectively.
But how do we do that? It's not like we can just eliminate stress from our lives entirely.
That's true. Stress is an inevitable part of life, but we can learn to navigate it more effectively to build resilience and develop coping mechanisms that help us manage those stressful situations without letting them overwhelm us.
So what are some of those coping mechanisms? What can we do to manage stress and prevent it from becoming chronic and detrimental to our health?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one person might not work for another, but there are some general strategies that can be helpful for most people.
Like what?
One of the most important things is to identify your stressors. What are the specific situations or events that tend to trigger feelings of stress for you? Once you know what your triggers are, you can start to develop strategies for either avoiding those triggers or managing your response to them.
That makes sense. It's about being proactive rather than reactive. Exactly. And once you've identified your triggers, you can start to build your stress management toolkit. There are tons of different techniques out there. Things like exercise, meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones. It's about finding what works best for you and making it a regular part of your routine.
So it's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
The more we practice these stress management techniques, the stronger and more resilient we become.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about being perfect. There will be days when you feel overwhelmed, and that's okay. The key is to have those tools in your back pocket so you can pull them out when you need them.
This is all great advice.
Mm.
And for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed by stress right now, I want to remind you that you're not alone. There are resources available to help you manage stress effectively. In fact, we have a whole section on stress management on our website,
Oh.
besthealthpodcast.site. You'll find articles, expert tips, and even guided meditations to help you find peace and balance in your life.
It's a fantastic resource for anyone looking to learn more about stress and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
So to wrap up our deep dive into the world of stress, let's come back to the key takeaway. Stress isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how we manage it.
Absolutely. In the right doses and with the right mindset, stress can actually be a powerful tool for growth and resilience. It can help us learn, adapt, and become stronger. But when stress becomes chronic and unmanaged, it can have serious negative consequences for our health and well-being.
The key is to find that sweet spot, to learn to harness the power of stress without letting it control us. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources available to help you manage stress effectively and live a healthier, more fulfilling life.
Well, it's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of stress. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And don't forget to check out Best Health Podcasts, site for more resources on stress management and other health and wellness topics. Thanks for listening to the Best Health Podcast. We'll see you next time.